Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you may be listening from. Welcome to another episode of Coaching Outdoor podcast with me, Paul Jeffries, and Anna-Marie Watson. Today, we're really excited. We're heading over to Belgium, to the Brussels region, to speak with Clemens Froelich, who is an outdoor coach, author, ultra-endurance athlete, and adventurer. So welcome, Clemens. And I wonder if you perhaps would just be kind enough to share a brief introduction to yourself, and we'll then dive into some more detail.
Thank you, and good morning, Paul and Anna-Marie. And yeah, I'm Austrian, and so in case you hear an Austrian-Germanish accent, that's because I'm Austrian, but I live in Brussels in Belgium. I have been living here the past couple of years, 6-7 years-ish. And I am an outdoor coach and credentialed by the ICF, and have been through 10 years of corporate career before that. And 2 years ago, I decided to take the leap and follow my entrepreneurial dreams. I always wanted to become an entrepreneur, and started to set up my own coaching practice, but also I'm a facilitator. And I do a bit of consulting connected to my past in the financial sector. So to round it up, I often say I am building a business during the day and I'm an adventurer during the night. But in the past, especially during business building, I've learned to bring the two of them closer together.
I love it. And when I saw that strap line that you have at the bottom of your email, for me, it very much reminded me of this phrase of, rather than living your 9 to 5, it's what do you do in the 5 to 9 in between and going on adventures. So yeah, great to have this conversation. It was really lovely to meet you in person earlier in the year in July in the beautiful grounds of Henley. You were there for our inaugural Coaching Outdoors live event, of which there will be more later, and with some exciting news there. But bringing it back to the here and now and kickstarting with the question that we ask all of our guests. It's a classic. So here we go. What is your earliest memory of being outdoors? And then there's the second part. Why do you enjoy the outdoors so much?
Mm-hmm. The earliest memories of being outdoors, growing up in Austria, and the mountains are obviously a big part of Austria and the Alps. And I still remember heading outdoors into the mountains with my brothers and my dad. And that's something which is still very present, because the mountains are still very impressive, but the younger you are, the more impressive they are, I feel. But there's also this other memory of, I was growing up on the outskirts of a city in Austria, so still close to the center, but still also in the outskirts. And there were little farms around, and often I was going with my brothers to one of those farms, and we were allowed to go into the stables and, petting the cows and even helping with the milking of the cows, and sometimes drinking the milk there in the stables, and playing in the hay and with the chickens. So that was also, or is still, another very vivid memory of being outdoors. So the mountains, but then also more the urban adventuring, being and playing on farms.
Wow, I love that. That's so good, Clemens. And it's so nice to sort of see that nature connection right through. And we love those stories of where people connect family, brothers, your father, the mountains, but then even the nature connection to the animals and the farm. Very warm memories.
And it brings me to the second part of the question, right? Of why I love so much being in the outdoors. And past years, I had a lot of time to think about this question, and I asked this question to myself a lot, and I tried to distill it down to one one sentence, and I arrived at the outdoors simply allow me to be myself. It is not that I'm not myself here now or elsewhere, but there's a set of written and especially unwritten rules we all ideally should live up to or comply to in our professional world, or anytime we connect with others. But while in the outdoors, either by myself or with others, somehow this set of rules, they are changing in a way, and they are much more authentic and natural. And being in the outdoors, it allows me to be there without filters, and that's what makes it so special for me. So bringing it down to I can be myself there without the need for thinking about written or unwritten rules we normally have.
That's so beautiful and really well said. I think that's a really lovely answer to that part of our question, and I love the authenticity of it. And as you say, the stillness, being this some solitude. There's all sorts of things that come from just being yourself in that place. So thank you for that. That's a really, really great answer. And what's kind of bringing all that together that you've ended up, in working outdoors is, could you share with us perhaps from a milestones, from kind of Austria, Belgium, and then, your work in corporate work to your coaching backstory, and specifically really what made you get outside?
That's far from being straightforward, I would say. I mean, the outdoors it's a personal passion I have, and I tried at one point in my life to see if I can bring together all the hours I spent in the outdoors, and I arrived somewhere at this magical number of around 10,000 hours. It doesn't mean anything, right? But it just I spend most of my time outdoors whenever I can. Obviously, otherwise I think we wouldn't have this conversation. In the beginning, after going to university and starting the corporate career, and I somehow always had the challenge of blending the outdoors with professional life, and not even speaking about making a living from it, but more, when we are young, we tend to work also more intensely, or having careers, especially when you're in a corporate system and climbing the ladder. So it was a lot of work, and sometimes there was space for a morning run or an evening workout, but no structural time for the outdoors. And I only realized that years later that I was missing this part. And so from Austria, I went via Frankfurt in Germany and via London in the UK, then finally to Brussels. And in Brussels, I settled in a bit more. So I had my job here. And I figured the only way I can manage my energy levels well is if I weave the outdoors better together with my professional life. And then I was taking my teams outdoors while I was leading projects, and we had our meetings outdoors, or we just were bringing in that outdoor element a bit more, and it worked very well. And together with this personal passion and seeing it works out within the corporate world, I thought, okay, how on earth can I bring them even closer together? And I always wanted to become an entrepreneur for various reasons, but simply because to see how far I can take that passion for the outdoors. So when I resigned from my corporate career, now circle closes, I was back to square one. I had no idea what to do. Now with the outdoors and all that flexibility, and then I did my coaching education. And why did I do the coaching education? Because I had the privilege of my employer allowing me to, or paying for an external coach. And I was skeptical about coaching in the first place, but turned believer very quickly. I think there was also a good connection with my coach back then. So I said, this works pretty well. And when getting the coaching education, I said, well, I can't be the 2 millionth business coach out there. It's just too hard to start a business from that. And it took me 1 year, and now the story comes slowly to an end. It took me 1 year to develop the courage to really weave the outdoors into my coaching, but also the facilitation aspect of the business and the adventuring and the endurance stuff I'm doing. So was trying to blend everything together, and I still see it's difficult to share this story because it is still not straightforward, right? And it is different elements come in at different times. And once I got my coaching education, I saw it will be very hard to enter the coaching market just as a coach. So I tried to bring in the outdoors and saw, okay, walk and talk, how could that work? How could outdoor coaching, and how could it work in a city like Brussels? And then I said, maybe that's not enough. I need to bring in this adventuring aspect I had from the early days. And then I started to take people and groups on night hikes, right, which present its very own challenges around the big city. But that is somehow the story, how it pieced together. It started from a corporate career with always this passion running in parallel, and then culminating in a moment of where I said, I want to take the leap now, otherwise I will not have the courage to take the leap again. There the trouble only started, because quitting a job is easy, but building your own company is even harder. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So various different steps and milestones, very much confusing at times. Sometimes it still is. And I would give back the mic to you now to jump in wherever that may be interesting.
Oh, thank you so much for your honesty about how difficult it can be to step away from the corporate world, which, yes, in itself has its own challenges and a certain work style, lifestyle. And then when you seek something different, as you say, leaving, oh, okay, see ya. And then, oh God, what next? And I totally hear this piece around the skepticism around coaching as an initial thought. And that was me when I started on my journey as well. You know, I very much left the army, and I was that kind of independent free spirit, like, I don't need any help, I can do this all by myself. What is coaching? I'm not broken, I don't need fixing. And you know, the beliefs and our stories and how we frame and how we evolve and how we grow. And this is what we love about the podcast, is that every guest has their own story wherever they are on their journey, whether they're just literally setting off or they've been doing this for, 20 years. Like, everybody has so much value to add, and this is what gives it the richness and the depths of it. So I mean, I would love to lean a little bit more into kind of setting your business up and really just understanding a bit more about the branding behind it, you as a coach and your identity, and then you've got this portfolio of different offerings, and a little bit more as to how they kind of balance each other out. That would be great.
Yeah, sure. And let me jump on that identity part, because I think that's such an important point. During this corporate career, I was building an identity, the corporate Clemens, which links a bit to what I said before. It's a set of written and especially unwritten rules in the corporate world you better live up to if you want to progress, which is always fine. And I knew them and I played along. But once I decided to start my own business, and the day, you hand in your laptop and you think, well, what's next? I started to ask myself a couple of questions, identity related questions, like who am I without this corporate title and without the company car and the decent salary and this whole corporate network you have because of your role, because of the identity you created. And once you take that away, it was interesting to see what remains on an identity level and what needs rethinking and what even needs to some shedding the old identity or old parts or certain parts of the identity and create new ones, which was a really intense exercise because I didn't know. I knew the outdoors. I knew coaching is cool. I was a well-trained facilitator. I had, of course, certain technical and content skills, given my past career. But that shaping, that took quite some time because I would rather consider myself as a generalist and not a specialist, and always being a people person and leading teams and projects. But that's a hard sell when you want to build your own company and go out there, especially in times like we are currently in. And it took me until very recently to iterate and reiterate and shape products and services. With what I said before, that after my coaching education, getting my ICF credentials, it's great to be an ICF coach, but then what? And the same was with, I'm a facilitator. I can design workshops and create space for others, but then what? And so this was pretty interesting journey to see what is it what I want, what is it what clients want, and how can I bring the two together. And recently last week, let me take one more step back. I do a lot of personal adventuring, and I know, Anna-Marie, that's one of your passion topics as well, the endurance sports. And for me, it's more in the hiking space, being an Austrian. And I do long distance ultra hikes, and this is always a big adventure for me. And I said, yet a hike by itself is not what it can be. So when I go out on those hikes and I tell the stories afterwards and I write a bit about it, people were very curious about the nights, spending nights outside alone. And at first I never thought, well, that's a big thing, because I was used to it. I trained myself to like it, and I prefer now nights over days often. And at one point I decided to offer my night hikes for just people like you and me in Brussels as well. I put them on Eventbrite, and then at one point, I received an email of someone from a large corporate asking, look, we are having our leadership offsite in Brussels, and we saw you're offering night hikes. Can we do something together? We are looking for an adventurous activity which blends into our strategy workshops during the day, but we want to take our group outside. And then I said, well, I'm onto something here. I do night hikes. I bring people together. I'm a coach. I'm a facilitator. So we were testing a bit what they need. And ultimately, I took them out last week, a group of 12 people, for a 2-hour night hike. And we did some facilitation, reflective exercises during that night hike. And it was a big, big success. And when I started my business 1.5 years ago, I would have never dared to put an offering out there which says, I take you out through the nights or into the nights, because first it could come across a bit weird, right? If you take people into the deep, dark forests. And I learned this is actually a real challenge, especially for women in bigger cities. So there was some kind of appreciation that there is a safe space created to take them outside. And then I started to combine it with coaching questions, and facilitating came in naturally, because that's what I do, bringing people together and creating space. That's just one of the stories of how not straightforward it was to build that business and use coaching and some aspects of facilitation and the personal passion of adventuring and being outside and blending them together.
That's great. And I think I just really want to thank you, Clemens, for sharing some of those great stories. Some of our listeners, I can't overemphasize enough to you how you're sharing here today. Everybody is exploring, and I can almost feel the exploration, the journey. I'm still journeying. I'm still putting together that entrepreneurial, 6 years in, and I can hear you working it through almost as you're talking to us. And I think for all of our listeners who are starting out, it's go and explore, try things. And it's interesting, the word bravery, and you were saying almost the confidence to go out and run a night. Yet you would have never thought of doing that 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And suddenly, and these things begin to evolve and your confidence grows. And I can hear that in you. And we sometimes, I use ikigai around finding your passion, finding what the world needs and bringing those together. And it sounds through your endurance and some of your many interests and, practices as that's beginning to evolve. But I think you're right. It is scary. It is the most difficult. Saying resigning, but then moving on is one of the hardest things, and building a business and being an entrepreneur is. But I think you're doing a great job at working your way through it. It sounds fabulous. And yeah, I think that will really resonate with many listeners in that early stage. So I want to move you on now to, you're a published author. And I think this almost really segues nicely into some of our conversation. That so you've published a book called Misogi Mindset: Transforming Lives One Adventure at a Time. Please tell us more. We'd love to understand this a bit more.
Yeah, I have a copy here for the camera. So it's a very slim book, right? It's not one of the typical business or self-help or whatever category we need to put our books in book. And also this one, it was a very it was never planned to write a book as such. It came again from trying to weave together and blend together that personal passion of more adventuring rather than outdoors, and the parallels into the business world. And I was often asking myself during highly stressful times in corporates, why am I able to focus more than others? Why am I more all those buzzwords, resilient and stress resistant than others? And at one point I figured it is because of that outdooring and adventuring part, which I do in my personal time. And the book is basically a result of one of my 160-kilometer through hikes last year, December, in Belgium, somewhere close to Brussels, actually. But it is a very difficult time to hike or run. I guess it will be the same in the UK. It's very muddy. It's very wet at times until sink into the mud until your knees. There's some sorts of floodings as well. And I was going on that hike, and during that hike, I felt like distance for much more than a hike. At every kilometer marker, every 10 kilometers, I was leaving myself a voice message to just check in with myself, a bit of self-coaching, even if you want, asking myself certain set of questions and also documenting the journey, because as it's so many hours out there, at a certain point when I reflect about being out there, I can't recall everything because the brain just needs to focus on what it needs to do. It's one step at a time. And when I came back from that adventure, I felt like I want to write down those experiences, and I started to write, and it became just longer and longer and longer. And I felt, shouldn't this be a bit bigger than just another blog post? And I'm writing and I'm just taking people on this journey of building a business and coaching and adventuring, and also on the internet. But I felt like it's so hard for me to explain what I do to others, right? Because I have a service-based business. It's not a product. And I felt like if I write a book, does it make it maybe a bit more tangible? Like, not only the process of giving someone something and physically touch it, but also then sharing those experiences. And yes, it's very much a personal story. And we can discuss about the value of personal stories. Can also discuss about the values of creating another framework and another methodology, which is just another way of doing it. And the book is a result of this hike and building my own business and bringing the two closer together. And what I've seen is also, it's a short book. It is like 15 short stories. So it lets people read in, and the time just finish the book in 2 hours, right? People celebrate a success because I don't know for you guys, but I have a full library of things I want to read and I can't read them. And sometimes I'm disappointed and it upsets me. I wanted to create something which is quick and easy to digest and ultimately inspires others to go out and do their own misogi adventures, which is basically, it's a Japanese ritual based on some samurai rituals in the ancient times, which involves some kind of purification under icy waterfalls to sharpen the mind and strengthen the whole body for the difficulties ahead. And we modernized it a bit in the Western world because we do ice bathing, but it can be anything. You can really make that concept your own, and it breaks down big challenges or adventures, but you only have a certain chance of success. Right? That's an important element of a misogi, that there must be a chance of failure as well. Ideally, it's a 50-50 chance. So, because failure as well as success provide equally chances for growth, and it should not endanger you too much. So dying is not an option, because we know people always take things to the extreme. So
I remember reading that, Clemens, that there was a rule that you must not die in a misogi.
Yeah, it sounds funny though, right? But at the end, it breaks it again down to the essence. It's a simple rule, right? You shouldn't jump into a river you don't know and try to swim to the other side. Yeah, maybe you have a 50-50 chance, but you also have a high chance of dying because of the currents. So it somehow sets a very big frame, but it's still a frame.
And this term, I have to say, just utterly intrigued me when Paul sent the questions through that we were going to be flowing through our conversation today. I was like, I have not come across that concept before. Like, this is interesting. And clearly the whole kind of like misogi, I had my jar of miso in the fridge kind of going like, okay, so how does this, what does this mean? So no, I was utterly intrigued. And I'm going to very hard try not to go on a total tangent about the endurance world, because that's not what we're here to talk about today. Clearly, I could spend hours going there, and loving your 160K through hikes and all that gives you and brings to you as a human being, and then ultimately what that flows through into your coaching. And this is where I'd love to go next, is this kind of the coaching. Okay, so the misogi and the coaching and possible future coaching program that you're developing. Please explain a little bit more.
Yeah, indeed. So the concept of misogi or misogi, it resonated well with people because it's simple to understand, right? Because of those simple rules. And I was thinking, as many people do, just like stealing the concept and just renaming it and trying to make it my own. But I like the concept, so I thought, well, why not bringing that to other people as well? And unintentionally, People are doing their own misogis already all the time, right? It's just now putting a bit of a concept around it. And whenever I have conversations about the book and people are reading it, they are intrigued by the different chapters because they touch upon everything you normally experience in an ultra endurance event, but also during either building a business or also in your corporate job or even personal lives. It touches upon these elements of fears, of giving up, and of just letting things go. And like in a long hike like this or in a long ultra run, there are moments where you normally want to give up. And finding ways to get through that. There is a lot of fear during the night. I still fear certain elements and parts of the night. And but also the courage to keep going and just being on that adventure. And I tried to build a coaching concept around it, not really knowing where to start, right? Because it's hard to build that program without pushing people too much in a certain direction. Because when I already say I have a misogy coaching, it entitles already that you need to do something which is connected to those rules, etc. So I became hesitant at one point whether it should really be the misogy coaching program. And yet what it did, it fueled those night hiking adventures, which is now a blend of coaching and adventuring and a bit of other things which corporate needs. But I bring in all those experience from all those long nights out there on the trails into that experience. And rather than having an isolated misogy coaching program, which I would need to push on people unless someone were one or two people only, not too many and not enough to build a program or a business around it to say, look, I want to do my own misogy. Can you help me with that? Yeah, certainly. But it for now remains a fraction of the business building, and it more got incorporated in those corporate adventures I'm offering, which then have a piece of coaching and a piece of adventuring. And I also often bring the book and people take the book and I receive feedback that, look, it's not only an easy book to read and I feel like I accomplished something, but I want to do my own misogy adventure, which is for me a much bigger impact because it drives people directly to take action, from inspiration to action, rather than me pushing something on someone else.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and I think that's really lovely, the way that that story has come full circle. And I think you're right. And for many of the listeners, it's understanding that it's a tool. It's the misogy coaching program is a tool. It's a framework that you and some coachees may well feel is something that they wish to enter into, and that's just a great tool to have. What I can see is that, you know, your adventures, your stories, and that inspiration that you give through your website, through your stories that your blogs. I think that, you know, you're right. There's something really powerful in that, and people will really, you know, identify and connect with that. And that leads us beautifully to the second part. And you've just given us a little taster that you have your own misogy adventure, and I believe people can see this on your website. And there are many things struck off. I will tell our listeners. Clemens has struck a number of them off and done them. And I'd love you just to share some of those achievements and perhaps what's coming up in the future as well, Clemens. And I know you've recently come back from Canada, I think it is, out in the big country. And so yeah, tell us about your list and what's coming up.
Yeah, maybe a quick thought on Canada, because I was thinking about it recently again, and what I enjoy of being in Canada is like where I live, at least, it's hard. Like I'm mostly in nature and I'm outside, but while in Canada, I'm in the outdoors, and that's a big difference for me. And because it's so wild there, it's so still most of the times untouched, and simply also the wildlife, right? I met bears, and you meet all these natural or majestic creatures, and you feel that you are just this very small element there, and yeah, this bear can still eat you, right? And so I would have a hard time doing night hikes in Canada, whereas I have an easy time doing that here. And here the biggest threat are obviously humans, and there still the biggest threat are animals. So that's it's a nuance, and it always reminds me that the great outdoors, it takes already a bit of an effort to find them, especially around big cities. And so that was the thought on Canada. And my own Misogi list, yeah, it's a rolling list, which I update from time to time. And it's also why the book is called Misogi Mindset, because I feel that it's really a mindset you can live by, and it's similar to Ikigai, right? Everybody tries to find something that resonates and that stays present in a very crowded world. So the thought of doing frequent misogis for me, it just helps me to remind me it is a journey, and there are difficulties along the way, and giving up is just part of that journey. And so the next one that is planned, it is still related to ultra hiking, and it's stretching the distance a bit and going up to 290 kilometers in 5 days maximum. It will be in February in the Ardennes in the south of Belgium, a very hostile place during winter, and there will be a couple of challenges, but the biggest one will certainly be sleep deprivation if you go through those days, and to finish within the cutoff time. So I'm intentionally looking now for a misogi where I will most likely fail. I have a certain ability to push my mind to places where others can't, and especially when it comes to sports, I didn't really fail yet, or those endurance adventures. So I tried to stretch it a bit and go to an event where my chances to succeed are in the 1-digit range, which is not a lot, but it's still possible. So that's the next big misogi, which is coming up. And it also prepares me. It starts already today, or it started already a couple of months ago, the mental preparation. And again, it's more a way of being rather than doing isolated misogis. So that's why I keep this list on my website to remind myself, whatever comes up, you put it on that list, and either you tick it off or not. It's a whole different story, but it keeps on reminding me that there are things I want to do for a specific reason, and in return, they will also help me to stay authentic and to build my business.
Good.
I have to say, your event in February just sounds, oh my goodness. I mean, I love endurance, but like, give me some sun anytime. And the mud piece is just something that's, oh dear, Southwest England and Belgium, I think there's probably a bit of a similarity going on. But best of luck. Best of luck. We'll be rooting for you.
I'll need that. Yeah.
Oh, and this piece around failure, it really, really resonates. For me, there's this, it's almost like you're flirting with your sweet spot and pushing that edge. Like, how do you know where your edge is unless you've really gone and not achieved what you set out to do? Because if you're always successful, then isn't there that little bit more like to push? And it's timely, this interview. I'm literally about to return in 10 days time to an event that I DNF'd 5 years ago, and I have carried the DNF since then, and how I've carried it has changed in that period, because at the initial point, like, I wore that failure hard. Like, it was me, like, I had failed, I was a failure. And then actually shifting that relationship, because that's not a great place for me. It wasn't a great place for me to be. And actually now I'm super excited about going back. I can't wait. And your concept as well, I'm going to be carrying it with me and taking little voice notes every 10K. I'm like, what an amazing way to capture the journey, because particularly at night and that witching hour between 3 and 4, it can just blur into this kind of soup of mental nothingness and emotion.
Exactly. And then when it also makes it easier to reflect on that adventure, right? And when you leave those voice notes, it just reminds you of what you have been going through, because either if you DNF or do not finish, or did not finish, or finish, there are certain elements you don't really remember. It's the same for building a business or personal transformations, right? We tend to look on those huge milestones or events or wins or failures, but there's so much in between which actually led to that piece of failure or successes. And think that's the most important part, what's in between those, what's happening in between those milestones, because they ultimately got us there. And it helps also in coaching to frame the right questions, or to frame questions which intrigue others, reflecting about those elements.
Thank you. And clearly with your book, you have that calling card which shares your stories and inspires others. And it is a really, really valuable resource. And maybe see you at Henley next year with your book. And that would be great. And other resources. What resources would you recommend to other coaches, to others who really want to develop their knowledge within this area?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It is, I have them here physically, right? And I found, actually, while I was traveling to the Henley event for Coaching Outdoors this year, stopped by a bookshop in London, and I found this book, Just Add Nature, from Rebecca Frank. And it basically gives a way to, well, as the title says, adding nature to your day-to-day life. So not going to one or the other extreme, but trying to weaving it in. And I found that very inspirational. The subtitle is How to Boost Your Health and Happiness Wherever You Live. And we often forget when we speak about outdoor coaching, or the outdoors, that not everybody has access to the outdoors. And most people still live in big cities. So there are ways in that book which can really help you to find ways to integrate nature in whatever we do, whether that be coaching or work or personal life. So that's one I can really recommend. Something which is maybe a bit more out of the box, but Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart, the physical book, which maps out all sorts of emotions, like all the emotions we as human beings can feel or experience. And she's basically mapping those with human connection. And it is very nicely based on all her research, and it is a resource which I use when I either design workshops or also when I start a new coaching relationship and I get to know the person and their personal story. I also dive into the book and see what is it behind there which helps me to build that coaching relationship. So that's a really good one to forge personal connections. And if we go more to the adventurous side of things, it's a bit less related to coaching, but and it makes the link to Canada. Adam Schultz is, they say he's the biggest Canadian explorer, or maybe even the biggest explorer globally nowadays. And he does all things related to hiking across Canada and mapping out old ways of crossing the country, old trade routes, etc. Really back to the basics, just his kayak and just some cereal bars and just his tent, no real electronics. So the old way of doing things, which I think becomes more and more a thing again, right? The antidote to technology. And the one more, it's super communicators from Charles Duhigg, which I think every coach should be not only a great facilitator, but also a great communicator. And it basically explains everything, also based again on science, but also on stories about the secret language of connection. It's a bit similar to the art of gathering. I think Lisa mentioned the book in her podcast recently, but yeah, communicating around that. So those are the 4 resources or 4 books I can really recommend, and a bit different maybe than what others do. There's much more I have, but I will not add to the list.
Clemens, that's a great resource library you've just done, and very different, actually. You're right, very different to perhaps some of the recommendations we've had. And we're well into our series 8 and 70 odd podcasts. So fantastic. And what I love is one of those ones, Rebecca, Frank, and you were talking. We're about, both Anna Marie, myself, and Alex. We're really exploring this coaching in grey space in cities. More and more people, as we know, it's city based, and how do we bring that nature in? So that's really apt. And I love the emotion connecting, and really nice broad spectrum. So thank you very much, and we'll get all those down. They'll be on your podcast, so our listeners and watchers can have a look at those recommendations, and please do jump into Clemens' recommendations. So we come to our last question, and always an important one, Clemens, that where can our listeners find out about you and your work, and how could they get in touch with you if they wish to?
Yeah. So the most obvious place is indeed LinkedIn, which is just a business place to hang out. But I try to bring in a bit more adventurous stuff to LinkedIn as well. I think it resonates always very well with people. So LinkedIn, I'm very responsive there. The personal website, clemensfroelich.com. It goes a bit more into depth of what I'm doing. And third place, which is my own writing, my online writing. It's my Substack on how to make a difference.substack.com. It combines the business building efforts without filters, and the coaching journey, which is a bit less in there yet, but the adventuring part is in there. So building a business and adventuring, and it will culminate now. It will go more and more into how I arrived now where I am, and building products and services. So following along the journey there is certainly also a good way to start, to help people think outside, and showing them that there's no box required.
Thank you for those signposts of where to hunt you out in the virtual world. And dear listeners, what has captured your attention? Like, reach out to Clemens, let him know if you're reading one of the books, what grabs your attention, what inspires you, and start a conversation. all of our guests are just so eager. They're so passionate about their work, and they love to connect with you out there within the wider community across the world. So do say hello, and also just share what you loved about the conversation today and what has inspired you. So thank you so much, Clemens. Like, what an honest and raw insight into your journey. And this concept of mesogai, like this is novel. This is a really, really interesting, insightful. It's got so much possibility. And really, listeners taking away in your day to day, like, what misogi can you find? Or actually, what about this list? If you got a list, if you haven't got a list and want to create one, whether there's an element of accountability in having it in a public space, or whether it's something that you want to keep private, this can be really something that for your life moving forwards, it can really challenge you, and you can learn and grow so much from it, and others can learn and grow so much from seeing you go through this process as well. So thank you for bringing that to our attention and our listeners' attention as well. Wow, Series 8 is flashing before our eyes, and we've had some absolute crackers of a guest, and we have some more really, really phenomenal individuals to come. And as ever, if there is anyone that you would want to recommend for the podcast, do let us know. We are always on the hunt for future guests, and we are super keen to really get a wide variety of diversity and inclusion from around the world. So like, we're on this hunt, and if you can be on the hunt as well and filter ideas back to us, that would be absolutely amazing. So yes, Series 8, if you're a new time listener, thank you so much for taking the time. There is a treasure trove of other conversations to be listened into, so would really, really encourage you to dive back into them and explore. And looking ahead, we have another amazing event in person coming up in summer of 2025. So you might have heard about the event that we had in July of 2024. It was an in-person get together. The feedback we received was amazing. Everyone said 2 days. Can we have 2 days? So that is what we have in the pipeline for next year. And tickets go on sale. So it's currently the 3rd of October. Not entirely sure when this episode is going to be released. It's probably going to be more November time. So by the time you're listening in, tickets will be on sale. So check it out. We'd love to see you in person. Clemens, hopefully you've got the date in the diary and you'll head over to the UK again. It would be great to see you. And there's more time. So hopefully, rather than fleeting conversations, we can maybe have a bit more of a conversation around a campfire, because we're really wanting to have this evening and nighttime opportunities to really connect. Maybe a bit of nighttime adventuring could be in store for people, who knows. But yeah, watch this space for the ticket link that goes live on the 10th of October. So that is it from us for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening in. If you have enjoyed it, and you think you know someone else who might enjoy the podcast who doesn't know about it yet, like, tell a friend, spread the word. We are growing at an enormous rate, which is really, really amazing. And we're super thankful, because it's you that's listening in that is making us possible. So please do share and tell a friend. So that is us from us all today. Clemens, thank you so much for your time, your knowledge and your wisdom, and keep up the amazing work.
Yeah, thank you, Clemens. It's been brilliant.
Thanks both of you, and definitely see you next year at Handley Live again.
Yeah, look forward to it.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks so much in advance for your support.